Welcome to the Bible for Kids podcast with your hosts, best-selling children's author Amy Parker and author and co-creator of VeggieTales, Mike Naraki. If instilling biblical values in kids is important to you, this podcast will help give you the resources, wisdom, and hope to do just that. Now let's join our hosts, Amy and Mike, for this week's episode.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Bible for Kids podcast. I'm Mike Naraki.
And I'm Amy Parker, and today we have author April Graney on the podcast, and we're going to tell you all about her and the wonderful work she does in just a minute. But first,
we like to start every episode of the Bible for Kids podcast with a Bible verse. So today's verse is, "Declare his glory among the nations, his marvelous deeds among all people." And that's from 1 Chronicles 16:24 in the NIV.
See what we did there, April? April Graney is the author of the 2017 Christian Book Award finalist, The Marvelous Mud House, a true story about finding contentment and joy based on her family's trip to Kenya, and her latest book, The Marvelous Maker. She lives at New Life Ranch in Oklahoma with her husband and 5 children and loves teaching math at a local Christian school for at-risk students. She has a master's degree in biblical studies from Dallas Theological Seminary and speaks passionately about God's heart for the world to children and parents at schools, churches, summer camps, and parent-child retreats. Okay, April. First of all, I looked up New Life Ranch in Oklahoma, and you live in a retreat center.
I
looks
do.
so serene. Yes. So
I do.
how does one go about making living arrangements such as these?
Oh, yes. Well, I've been connected with New Life Ranch for a long time. I first came as a camper, as a little going into 4th grade, and fell in love with this place. Came to summer camp every summer, and as soon as I was old enough, joined their training program and became a counselor, and met my husband here as he was a counselor as well. And then we went to seminary together after we got married, and God called us here back to New Life Ranch. And we've been here for 17 years total, and we've raised our kids here, and it's just been a wonderful place to be a part of. So we love it.
That's awesome. And you have 5 kids, is that right?
Yeah, 5. We're kind of crazy that way.
So what ages are they, and what do they think about basically living in a summer camp for the whole year?
Yes. Yeah. In a paradise for kids. So
Exactly.
So my husband likes to say we had 5 children in 7 years. We're kind of crazy. And right today, our oldest was almost 8 when the last one came. But anyway,
and you have quadruplets.
5 and 7 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they range they're every 2 years. So they're ages 12, 14, 16, 18, and 20 now.
So they never fought growing up then?
Never. They never do.
Right.
I have brothers. We were spaced out about 2 years apart each, and that makes for some fun times growing up. For sure.
Yeah. So we have 2 girls and then 3 boys. So you can imagine 3 boys. But we have a lot of acres of woods to send them out to whenever we need to. So we do that often.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. And so your bio says that you speak at these camps and these retreats. So what do you speak about? What do you find that our kids and families most respond to? What do they need to hear when they visit New Life Ranch?
Sure. Well, I have spoken to our summer camp, our junior campers, which is they're going into 3rd grade up to 6th grade. And whatever the theme is that summer. So every summer our camp comes up with a theme for the summer. The gospel is always part of it. And we share the gospel. We start out with the creation and God's intent for why he created us and what he created us for. He created us for a purpose, on purpose, and for a purpose. And so we talk to them about the grand story, right? The Bible, the epic story of the Bible, what we're made for, and how God loves us, and how He offers us the gift of salvation. And we try to help kids find find their identity in Christ. Our mission here is to proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ and equip believers for ministry. So we really want to take kids as they return year after year, and as they get older and they join, we have a leadership development program where we try to train them to be Christian leaders. And so where they'll go back to their schools and go back to their communities, and they're prepared to share the gospel, and they're prepared to lead others to Christ and be leaders in their schools and their communities. So that's kind of what we do. I've also spoken at a parent-child retreat, so like mother-daughter retreat, mother-son retreat, and that is always a fun weekend thing that we do in the spring and fall.
Really cool.
So back to the identity in Christ thing. Oh, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
We've been hearing that a lot on this podcast lately.
Mm-hmm.
Why? So does that seem like that's more relevant now than it was maybe when you were there as a fourth grader? Or do you think that's just something that we always struggle with?
I think it's something that we always struggle with. I think that is something that that's a lie that Satan tries to tell us lies all the time, that we're worthless, or to cause us to compare ourselves to other people. And, we tend to fall into those traps. And not to get into the book too quickly, but there's a line in The Marvelous Maker that says, that kind of was powerful for me when I wrote it. And in the months following, just repeating this, is the Maker tells his creation, throw off his lies and you will see I've made you to be royalty. And the fact that we do have to throw off the lies of Satan that, is trying to beat us down and cause us to think less and negatively of ourselves, that God didn't create us to do that. God created us to be his children, and he has designed us specifically for a purpose, for good works that he created beforehand for us to do before we were even born. And so it's just such an important thing that kids do need to learn. And as they grow up, that as they're looking for their identity and they're looking for their purpose in life and what they're going to do with their lives, right? To know that God has a plan, that God has good plans for them and a future and a hope. So.
And April, you mentioned that you fell in love with this retreat center as a child, and then how? And now that you have your own kids growing up in this environment, do they help out? And what have they learned in the process of being there and as part of your family?
They do. My kids, when we first moved here, we didn't have kids. And then they all started coming, one after another. And as they've grown up, they have worked alongside us, building fires for retreat groups or serving we have a canteen and where kids can buy snacks and drinks and apparel and that kind of thing. And our kids have learned a lot of their math skills from making change. Hey,
that's a lost art these days.
It is. So they have spent many hours doing that. And then they've also just really benefited from being able to go to camp themselves. Even though we live on the property, for them to be able to be in a cabin with counselors who love on them and encourage them and build into them. It's just been really powerful. And my kids benefit from not only getting to go to a week of camp, but getting to be around those counselors all summer long. These college students who love the Lord and are really committed and who love on kids, and love to share that message with kids. And so, I think it's been, I've always said, I hope my kids don't take it for granted, that they've been able to grow up at a place like this. But both my daughters are on summer staff this summer. My oldest, Anna, it's her second year on summer staff as a counselor, lifeguard counselor this summer. And then my second daughter, Abigail, is going to be a counselor for the first time this summer. And so they are just super thrilled because they love kids, they love Jesus, and I'm excited for them to be able to pour into other kids, and to lead them in their Bible studies and just talk to them in their every night after chapel. They have a talk back time where they discuss, with the campers what the message was. And it's just a really powerful experience for them, not only being a counselor in a cabin, but also that camaraderie between the staff and the summer staff, and how they encourage each other, not only in the summer, but throughout the year. It's really powerful, really neat thing. So
that's so cool.
And then my son Micah is in the leadership development program this summer in the second year of that. So he'll have an opportunity to do more service and training this summer in there.
And how old is he?
He's 16. So
yeah. I
Yeah.
can't imagine I was just going to say, I can't imagine how transformative that is to just grow up in that environment of mentoring and leading and serving, and just have that be a second way. I mean, just a like, that's just your daily life. That's just, you're not going into, you're not going to, serve the homeless or whatever. You're not going into that environment. You live in that environment.
We do.
So I can't imagine how powerful that would be. And we're going to take a break right now, but when we get back, we're going to talk about your books. They're absolutely gorgeous, but we're going to talk about those and what inspired those. But we'll be right back on the Bible for Kids podcast.
We're excited about something new, the Bible for Kids bookstore on bookshop.org. This new store helps support this podcast, but more importantly, independent bookstores across the country who also receive a share of sales. Visit bookshop.org today and look for the Bible for Kids bookstore, or visit our website at thebibleforkids.com, where you'll find links to the bookstore and features from authors on this podcast.
Where is Wisdom? Where is Wisdom takes us on a creative tour through the beautiful truths found in Job 28. I don't know about you, but the book of Job can be a challenging read, yet Scott James gets to the heart of the poem that Job 28 is. He so simply yet creatively shares the message that the greatest treasure is found in God and in the wisdom that He alone can provide, a truth that everyone needs to hear.
Welcome back to the Bible for Kids podcast, and we're speaking with author April Graney.
Okay, April. So before we dig into the books, we need a little background here. So your bio says math teacher, master's in biblical studies. You're an author. You're a mom, and I'm guessing at the camp you wear a lot of other hats. So which came first, a degree in math and then biblical studies, or how did this all come about? When did author take its place in here?
Right. Believe it or not, my college degree is actually in English education, teaching English.
Yay! Go English nerds.
Yes. And so that came first, although we went straight out of college to seminary at Dallas Theological Seminary. And so we went there for my husband to go to school, and I audited a class and said, oh my goodness, I love this. I have to do this too.
Oh, that's so cool.
So we extended our time there by a year, and we were able to both graduate together with our biblical studies degrees. And then we started a family. So the mom hat came next. Here at New Life Ranch. And let's see, we began homeschooling, and I homeschooled for about 14 years. My daughters basically through their schooling. And then this past year, we realized we need to make a change. There's a Christian school near here called Cookson Hills Christian School. It's part of Cookson Hills Christian Ministries, and they provide home, school, and therapy for kids at risk. So they live in houses of 10 students with house parents, and they have a school on campus. And so they all live together, go to school together. They provide counseling for the students once a week. And our boys, as homeschool students, participated in their basketball program for a couple years. And we just fell in love with the school. And really wanted to, the Lord placed on my heart, said, if I was to work here and teach here, could my kids go to school there as well, my boys, so my younger three. And so I went and talked to him, and lo and behold, they had this position open for a middle school math teacher. And I actually,
Bless your heart.
in the process of homeschooling, I actually found out that I really loved math. I don't know, the last few years of it, I was really enjoying math. And so it's just been a really great fit. And I have small class sizes. I have between 5 and 9 students in each class. And so it can be really individualized. And I get to love on these kids that have some really hard stories and backgrounds. And I get the opportunity to share the love of Christ with them while teaching math. So it's been an awesome thing for our family and for us, real answered prayer.
That's awesome. Well, let's get into
the author.
Get into the books. Yeah, let's do this. Okay, so your first book, The Marvelous Mud House, was inspired by a trip to Kenya. Is that right? Why did your family visit Kenya, and how was a book inspired by that trip?
Yes. So I kind of skipped the whole author part, didn't I? How that ended up.
That's okay. We're going to talk about it now.
All those years of homeschooling my kids, I loved reading children's books to them, and that was my favorite part: reading children's books and reading aloud and reading it to them. And I always dreamed of being an author and writing a children's book. And but I kind of got to the point where I was like, Lord, I don't know if that's going to happen for me. You haven't really given me a story. But my brother and his family, his wife and their 4 kids are missionaries in Kenya. He's a missionary, full-time missionary doctor at a hospital in the mountains of Kenya. And we decided as a family, God opened the doors and made it a way for us to be able to, all 7 of us, travel in 2013 to visit them in Kapsawar, Kenya. And it was an incredible trip. It was a huge step of faith, stretch for me, but it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. We absolutely just loved it. And while we were there, we met a mother and her son. Actually, my brother introduced us to them and kind of gave me a little bit of their background story. And so, in Kenya, the moms, when they have their first child, they go by their child's name. So her name was Mama George. Her name's Agnes, but her oldest son's name is George. And so everybody calls her Mama George. And her son, So one of the things we learned while we were there is that school fees, the kids have to pay fees to go to school, and that can really be burdensome for kids and for families. And so a lot of kids don't go past 8th grade, or they don't enter school at all because of the fees. And so that's something my brother had said, hey, you can, if you guys come back from Kenya and decide you want to help with something, school fees would be a huge, huge thing. And so we came back, and after meeting George and Mama George, we talked to our kids and we said, hey, we've been on this incredible trip, and we've seen just the different way of living and the need that's there. And we have so much that we could, a small sacrifice could make such a big difference in their lives. And so we really wanted our kids to do this. We asked them if they would do it, is to sponsor George to be able to go to school. And so they had their own little kids only meeting on our back porch and talked about ways they could raise money. And so they came back in, and they all had decided on, whether it was babysitting or having a bake sale or mowing lawns, or just, earning a little bit of money here and there, keeping people's pets, feeding the neighbor's dog, whatever. They were going to save that each year and use that to send George to school. And so we sent a message through my brother, through my sister-in-law, actually, to Mama George, to Agnes, to say, hey, we'd like to sponsor George for him to be able to go to high school. And I got a text back from my sister-in-law, and she said, oh my goodness, April, if you could have seen her reaction when I told her that you all wanted to sponsor George to go to school. She said she was just jumping up and down and crying for joy and just so excited because George had been asking her. He was studying they have to take these exams in 8th grade to be able to get into high school. And he had been studying, but he was like, Mom, why should I even really study? We don't have the money for me to go to high school. Like, I'm not going to be able to go. And she had already been telling him, keep working, keep studying, keep working hard, George. God's going to provide.
Wow.
And so when I got that message from my sister-in-law, I couldn't go to sleep that night. And I was just thinking, because I knew she lived 2 miles outside of the village and had to walk every day to come to work up and down in the mountains. And so I was imagining her just running back from the village to her home to find George, running back to tell him, God's provided for, for you to go to school. And so I got up in the middle of the night and wrote the first draft of The Marvelous Mud House from that. And woke up my husband the next morning. I was like, you have to, people need to hear this story. They need to hear how God provides, and how he answered this prayer. And we didn't know she'd been encouraging him that way. We didn't know that she'd been praying and asking God to provide. So, and then the Lord just amazingly allowed me to be able to make the right connections and find the right people and be able to have that book be published so that people could hear the story. So today, George has actually graduated from high school, and he's been in
Yay!
He's graduated and he's been in college courses, and he's studying journalism. He has an amazing radio voice. I have some recordings he sent me, and
all right.
He recently sent me a recording of him reading The Marvelous Mud House, and so
I'm hoping
that we can do something really special with that as well. So it's just neat to see, where is God going to take him in life from this. So
yeah, that's such an amazing story, and just shows you how. So many things, but one, how much we take our own education for granted. I know right now, we're educating by force here because the kids are out of school, and here in Tennessee anyway, the extended learning is optional right now, except for a couple of courses, the AP courses my son is in. So, but just having that perspective that, that education truly is a privilege that not everyone is afforded. That's not really a sentiment we carry in this country. And so just seeing that perspective alone is so eye-opening, I think, for our kids. And then also seeing how even at a young age, your kids can band together and literally transform someone's life. They provided him a chance to go through school, and just by babysitting and doing odd jobs and things like that. So, that message alone.
Yeah. And I was thinking, just how humbling that must be to realize that you are the answer to somebody's prayer, and how powerful that is. To know that God is working through you. You're the hands and feet. And sometimes we kind of think that, those answers from prayer kind of come from somewhere else. God provides, through something else, but to realize that that's us is super powerful.
Right. Yeah. And a need across the world. He can hear a prayer in Africa and answer it through a family and, across the ocean.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So that released in 2017. That was 3 years ago. Yes. What was it like having your first book published? How did your family respond to that? The book itself, and I guess they gave input. They sort of helped write the story. They were characters in the story.
They were.
So how did they participate in the development of that book? I know you said you wrote it in the middle of the night, but did they have input that shaped that story?
They did. I mean, they were right along with me the whole process. Like every time the manuscript we revised, every time I rewrote a paragraph or a line or shared, I would read it to them and get their input. And anytime I would try submitting it anywhere, like, hey, I found this agent, I want to send it to him. Let's pray. We'd circle up in the living room together and just kneel around the coffee table and pray. Hey, Lord, I'm sending this off and I'm putting it in your hands. And so they got to see how God answers prayer in that way as well, as part of that process. And then they celebrated with me, they celebrated when we had a big old dance party, in the living room when got that first contract. And they've been super supportive through the whole process. It's been really great. I'm very thankful, and my husband too.
That's awesome. Well, let's go ahead and take another short break. And when we come back, we'll speak with April about her second and most recent book, The Marvelous Maker. So we'll be right back on the Bible for Kids podcast. Epic Devotions, 52 Weeks in the Story That Changed the World, is a collection of insightful devotions which explore biblical events in a way that is relevant and exciting. You'll enjoy B&H Kids Book's special feature, Parent Connection, an easy tool to help you engage in meaningful discussions with your family. Available everywhere books are sold.
Mike Naraki, co-creator of VeggieTales, is back. In his hilarious new chapter book series, 10-year-old Michael and his friend Justin sneak into the Dead Sea caves near the archaeological dig where Michael's dad is working. Michael finds a couple of 2,000-year-old squirrels petrified in sea salt. Hijinks ensue as Michael tries to bring them back to the U.S., hidden in his backpack. What Michael thinks are just cool souvenirs may turn out to be something much more. The Dead Sea Squirrels series is humorous, fun, and filled with character-building lessons. As co-creator of VeggieTales, co-founder of Big Idea Entertainment, and the voice of the beloved Larry the Cucumber, Mike Naraki has been dedicated to helping parents pass on biblical values to their kids through storytelling for over 2 decades. To find your own Dead Sea Squirrels, head over to Tyndale.com, Amazon.com, or your favorite bookstore.
Don't forget to remember. Ellie Holcomb's newest children's title, Don't Forget to Remember, is the perfect Easter gift for your kids this year. Teach them how to look around and find reminders of God's great love for them everywhere they go. And similar to her first book, Who Sang the First Song, Ellie has a song to go along with Don't Forget to Remember, which you'll enjoy singing as you flip through the beautiful pages of the book. Both the song and the book are available wherever music and books are sold. So, April, your second book, The Marvelous Maker, releases in September. Can you tell us what that's about?
Yes. So The Marvelous Maker is the story of how God made us and how he saved us. So it's 44 rhymed lines, and it tells the entire epic Bible story from creation, fall, redemption, all the way from Genesis to Revelation.
Oh, really cool.
That is no small feat. Writing 44. Can we just hear that again? Sure. 44 rhyming lines. As a writer, I'm already exhausted, about what it would take to do that. But I love that it captures the whole story from creation to redemption in a way that kids can understand and fall in love with. So what inspired you to write it? Now, I heard you saying this sort of as you were talking about what you talk about at camp. You said that this is sort of what you share with the kids. But what inspired you to write this, and what made you choose to write it as a parable?
Yes. Okay. So I was having my devotions on October 1st, a year after. So this would have been 2018, a year after The Marvelous Mudhouse came out. And nobody talks about it, but when your first book comes out, you deal with a lot of, I think, at least I did, you deal with some insecurity and identity wrapped up in, this book.
Nah, that's just you.
And you never read your reviews on Amazon either, right?
Oh my goodness.
That's just you. I'm totally confident. Even now when they come out, I don't even think about that.
It's good to hear from other authors that, this is maybe a common thread. Yeah. So I was having this devotion and looking back on the first year after that first book came out, and I was really confessing to the Lord, that I found my identity so much wrapped up in The Marvelous Mudhouse, and I went to the Psalms, and I was reading in Psalm 98. Psalm 98:1 says, "Oh, sing to the Lord a new song, for he has done marvelous things." And I wrote in the margin of my Bible, The Marvelous Mudhouse is not about us or Mama George. It's about his marvelous works, the marvelous maker. And that's when the title came to me before any of the manuscript actually did. I had written that summer a skit that I had some of my counselors perform on the stage that was the gospel story. And it was based on one of the clearest class lectures I remember from seminaries, Dr. Bill Lawrence teaching on Romans chapter 8. And Romans 8 talks about how we're slaves to sin and that we need to be slaves to righteousness. And so Dr. Lawrence talked about this king sin. He went on and on about king sin and king righteousness. And, this king sin wants to rule over us, and we're under his rule and authority. We can do nothing but obey him as unbelievers. And then when we come to Christ, how we have a new king who's king righteousness. And that imagery just really stuck with me. And so I wrote this skit for summer camp based on that. And after that, I began mulling over. And then when the Marvelous Maker title came to me, it was like, okay, this is what the Marvelous Maker needs to be. It needs to be, the story of how God created, and then this tempter came in and ruined everything for us, right? Tempt us into sin, right. And how God came down and became a man and came and sacrificed and gave his life for us and redeems us. But then it doesn't end there. It ends with the fact that we are in a battle, and we still have this enemy who is trying to overtake us. And we need the armor of God, the full armor of God, to be able to defeat this enemy. And so the Marvelous Maker is really just that whole story. The way it became a poem, instead of a skit from summer, mm-hmm. is the first line came to me, and from that, the first line was a poem. It says, "Every twinkling star above was tossed across the sky with love." And that line just kind of went through my head over and over again for several weeks. And I knew that like the rest of it, I was going to write the rest of it, but I was busy with kids and school and all of our activities. And so it's like it kind of put on hold, like, okay, this needs to be fleshed out. One of the nice things about my husband had a conference. And so as the wife, I was able to tag along on this conference and get about 4 days in a hotel room all by myself with nothing else to do but write.
Yeah, those are great for writing.
That was, yes, I was a tag along. And so I sat in this hotel room, and I was able to, I just started with Genesis 1 and the 6 days of creation. And each line just kind of goes with what happened the next day and the next day and the next day as the Maker creates the world.
Yeah.
And it just continued on from there.
And that, the verse you read is just very visual. And, I want to talk about the illustrations because they're really, really cool, colorful, they're abstract. The scene on the cross is almost surreal with the serpent woven throughout the scene. So what was the illustration process like for you? And did you work with the illustrator, verse by verse, or how did the whole process work?
Right. So my editor at B&H found the artist, and I think she gave me several options, and we kind of looked through. And then after the art, when the artist was chosen, they asked for art direction. And so with each of we kind of divided up into pages, and then with each of the spreads, I was able to kind of give a little bit of direction of, this is kind of what each page needs to look like. And, we came, you asked about it being a parable. So the characters, instead of Adam and Eve, because Adam and Eve, we know they're real people, right? When God created them, but they didn't live through the entire Bible. They didn't live through the incarnation of Christ and the crucifixion and the resurrection and Revelation, but they represent, in the Marvelous Maker, they represent all of us. And so Adamus and Genevieve are the names in the story. And so the artwork came in for Adamus and Genevieve, and it was like, whoa, okay. Eve has some fiery red hair, and they're kind of and Adam's got this curly dark hair. And I mean, it's just, it's so beautiful, but it was just unexpected when it came in at first, like, whoa, wow. And we've got the serpent, the tricky tempter, Satan is the tricky tempter, and he's this big purple snake. And it's really fun. It's really fun and exciting. And
I love the process of just kind of working with a team and with others, how, you mentioned it was a surprise to you, and I found that happen many times, on projects that I've done where, I have this image of, okay, this will be kind of cool, but then somebody else comes in and adds their gifts and their talents to it. And it makes it, much more than you ever expected. And, things start to become greater than the sum of their parts, which is such an exciting thing.
Right. Yeah. It's so beautiful. Yeah. I'm really pleased with how it all came out.
And I love that Adamus and Genevieve do carry on throughout the entire book, so that they kind of represent all of us and all of us experiencing the entirety of that story and how it affects all of us in that way. But what are you hoping when this comes out? What are you hoping that families learn from this book? What do you hope the big, the takeaway is, or how it transforms them as families and as individuals?
I hope they get to know who the maker is,
Yeah.
I mean, the kids need to know they have a maker who was very intentional to create this beautiful world, and to spend time and slow down and create, his crowning act of creation, his creatures that he created to love him and walk with him day by day. And he created them perfectly. And yet that creation is groaning at the moment as sin has entered our world. And so as kids can kind of see this thread, we learn Bible stories, in bits and pieces in Sunday school and growing up. And I just hope this book kind of gives the grand story, the whole picture of how it all fits together. And so that they get to know the maker, that he sacrificed his life for us. And that one of the other really powerful lines that I really hope they can take away from is the one that says, their sins across the seas were tossed. And the fact that, when the children come to the maker and they say, forgive us, maker, we were lost. Micah 7:19 says that he will hurl all of our iniquities into the depths of the sea.
Yeah.
That God,
and that's such a visual notion too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so they'll see that and make the connection that God forgives us and that we have the chance to walk with him. The second to last spread in the picture, you see Adamus and Genevieve in like royal garb and they're, it's representing that the armor of God, that we put on, and that we are in a battle, and but we have the maker at our side. He's given us the resources and the trainings to be able to live this life, the way God intended, and to love and praise him. So
that's awesome. So the Marvelous Mud House is available wherever books are sold. And can we pre-order the Marvelous Maker now? And then how else can our listeners connect with you?
It is. It's available for pre-order on Amazon, and I believe Lifeway, probably you can pre-order it. And anywhere books are sold, I believe. You should be able to get it. I think Books A Million is going to have it in store, The Marvelous Maker, I've heard. So hopefully that's the case.
Yay.
Yeah, it would be great to see it in store.
Yeah.
And I have a website called One Happy House. It comes from the line of, it's onehappyhouse.org. It comes from the last line of The Marvelous Mud House. It says One Happy House on a Ranch. And so that's who we are. That's where I do a little bit of blogging, and people, they can click on contact me there. And I've had teachers contact me, and so I'm doing some virtual classroom visits that way through connecting with them there. So I'd love to do those kinds of things.
Awesome. Okay, so onehappyhouse.org, and then look for The Marvelous Maker in Barnes & Noble and wherever books are sold, and just go ahead and get The Marvelous Mud House right now, right? Thank you so much, April. Yeah, thanks so much for joining us today. We've learned so much talking with you, and we can't wait to see The Marvelous Maker.
So listeners, we're always sharing about wonderful resources for your family and even giving lots of them away. To learn more, follow us at The Bible for Kids on Facebook or Instagram, or head to our website, thebibleforkids.com. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Bible for Kids podcast with Amy Parker and Mike Naraki. Be sure to connect with The Bible for Kids on Instagram and Facebook and at thebibleforkids.com. We'd love to hear your comments and ideas for future podcasts. You can email us info@thebibleforkids.com. The Bible for Kids podcast is part of the Way Nation Podcast Network. Find more podcasts at waynation.com.